Hey everybody, Dave Ristello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of Growing Your Firm podcast. Today's guest is Colleen Gillam-Judd. She is a certified financial planner at IG Wealth Management. And, we were talking in the pre-show, we're like, there's a lot of firm owners. We hear a lot about wealth management. We hear a lot about adding wealth management services or building partnerships or referrals. And Colleen was like, well, nobody's asking them about their plans. And so I'm excited. We're going to dive into today's interview. We're going to talk through a couple scenarios and start how to think about your own wealth. Yes, you, the listener, how to think about the wealth you're creating in this asset you're building. But first and foremost, Colleen, I just wanted to welcome you to the show.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I love the angle you're coming in at, because I thought, we're probably going to talk about partnering, and you're like, no. Why don't we figure out what their plan is, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So many firm owners, every wealth person wants to partner with them, but no one asks, how are they doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess as you've been working within the ecosystem and, working with these firm owners, I guess what is the typical moment in time where they start thinking about wealth management, what to do with their cash flow? Where do you typically start working with folks, or what happens in their life where they raise their hand and say, hey, I might need some help?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks. It's usually when, it seems like it's a standard piece for all of us entrepreneurs where you've had your head down for a few years, you've built up the business to a space where you're like, oh, look, there's money in the checking account. There's cash flow. I'm not so stressed anymore about how I'm going to make sure all my employees get paid, right? You finally get to that place where you're like, financially, I can take a vacation. Now I just have to figure out the time. That's usually when people come to me and start going, well, what do I do with it now? Like, how do we make this work? We've made it work for all our clients, help them, but like, what about me?
Yeah, and I feel especially for firm owners, there's a little bit of, I will say, fear that if I splurge on a vacation, does that somehow put my, I'm losing my edge. I'm becoming too soft, right? I'm not going to be as hungry. And why shouldn't I just take all this capital and put it into insert investment vehicle, stocks, real estate, buying up other businesses? So do you typically have these kind of mental hurdles when you're working with people, especially business owners that maybe have this fear of losing it all?
Oh, absolutely. Right. People that build successful businesses, we're overachievers. And it's scary when you get to the spot where you're like, okay, well, now this is as big or bigger than I thought I would ever be. I don't want to mess it up. I want to continue to grow. But how do I integrate having some fun and not having to work 80 hours a week? So it's really common. And it is something that we spend a lot of time talking about. Like, what do you as the business owner want to do personally for the next 5 and 10 years? And what do you want the business to do for the next 5 to 10 years? And how do we make it work? How do we integrate you getting to take a little time off? You can afford the holiday or the new house or the new vehicle without feeling like, well, now we're just going to go backwards and this is it. Because that's not how it needs to be.
Yeah. So what do you typically, and I know we're going to dig into an example here in a second, but when you ask that question, where do you want to be over the next 5 years and where do you want the business to be? I guess, what are some samples of answers that you get back?
Usually, personally, is trickier for the main business owner. I try and make sure all my meetings include the owner of the business and their spouse, if they're not in it together, and go through it with each of them, because everyone has different ideas of what success looks like financially, right? For some of us, it's about security. For others, it means freedom. So figuring out for each person, what's their definition of financial success and what do they just want to do? It's not good or bad. It's getting them both on the same page, personally first, because that sometimes is easier. And then we set a date or sort of pick the top 3 most important for the next couple of years, and we work on those first. And then we run through the exact same exercise for the business, because you need that to grow along with you, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole goal.
How often is it common that when you're having this money conversation with business owner plus spouse, are they typically aligned? Do they have the same goals, or are they typically not aligned? And this may be like one of the few times they've talked about their maybe financial goals. What's the most common?
Most common is they've never really talked about it, where it hasn't been either something that might happen in the future or a little bit of a disagreement at home. It's a lot of times the first space where each of them have had a chance to think about it for a couple of minutes and come up with their own list. And usually it's very different.
Oh
But
man. So what do you do? What do you do? I mean, how you become the money therapist for a little bit. What do you do to reconcile it?
yeah, for a couple minutes, but it's good because most of the time there's no upset. It's not a problem. It's just going, well, I didn't know that, you know, one of them really wanted to do that big trip to Hawaii. And the other one's number one goal is like, I just want a new vehicle. And more times than not, it's always positive.
Yeah.
It helps them tremendously. Go, okay, well, here's the 2 things that we both really want to do. Let's make that happen. Because it's usually never about, is there enough money? The money's there.
I guess that's why they're talking to you. Well,
Yeah.
we
Which
woke up
one?
one day and this thing called my firm seems to be working.
Yeah.
Now what?
Now what?
Yeah.
And it's a ton of fun because it's no longer just about the bank account balance. It's what do you want to do with it?
Yeah. Well, let's unpack an example, and then maybe we'll hop around within an example. So, lay out for us and the audience. Like, let's start with an example client, and let's start talking through what they might be doing with their finances, or what they could be doing, based on their scenario. And again, audience members, you can kind of contextualize to your heart's desire here.
Yeah. So typically I see people, so I've named, because I use this example a lot because it helps firm owners sort of get an understanding. So I've named my fake people, Sarah and Tony Bean Counter. Their accounting firm, Bean Counter LLC, has been in business for 5+ years. They're in a place where the company makes lots of money or makes enough money. They have excess funds in the corporation. They're paying themselves a healthy salary. Their personal bank accounts are doing well. The first step, like as we discussed, is talking about what are their goals. Typically, I see people, they've got a couple of young children that are school age. They'd like to travel. They a lot of times are looking to possibly upgrade their home or move to a school district that, is what they feel the best for their children. They'd like to be able to save for their college and university for the kids, help out their parents as they age, want to go on a family vacation once a year, and, would like to maybe go on a holiday with just their spouse. Sarah and Tony want to go on holidays once a year, just the 2 of them, no kids.
I love it. Colleen, to take a step back, when you say good
Mhm.
salary, good, I mean, we'll talk ranges here, but like, what do you see, kind of typical range? Is bank balance, take home salary? Like, what are some of the numbers, that or ranges you see, when you say healthy or it's, in a solid place?
Yeah. So typically it's the ability, either they've already taken out of the company or the ability to take out a couple $100,000 every year. In their savings accounts, they've got 3 months of living set aside. They've started saving for the kids. They just don't know if they're saving enough or in the right place. They've got money set aside for things like, the shingles go on the house or whatever, right? They've got an emergency fund. They just don't know if it's allocated properly in the right places.
Got it. And then, some level of, sounds like investable capital. So if you have a couple 100,000 of take home, There is, I don't know what you would consider the range, 15 to 25% of that is available to invest every year. Okay, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower.
Yeah. Typically, they've got investment accounts. They've started saving. Usually, they just have them for retirement or the kids' school, but they're able to put away, 15, 20% of their income for long-term type investments. Sometimes the companies also started investing, just depends on how they have set up their withdrawals from the corporation to personally, but it's
Got it.
available on one or both sides.
Yeah. So it sounds like, Tony, Sarah, they're checking some of the, foundational money boxes,
Mhm.
but now they have money. They're like, well, I'm maxing out this contribution here. I feel okay maybe about education, although goodness knows how much education will be in 15 years. If you have young kids, you're like, it's probably going to be okay, but who knows?
Yeah.
But there is seemingly the tens of thousands of dollars, almost quote unquote extra, that they might be coming into, and they're trying to invest wisely. Is that a fair kind of picture I'm painting here?
Yes. And sometimes we know we have the cash flow coming in, but it just, at the end of every month or every quarter, we've spent it all and we don't
Yeah.
really know where or why or how. Like, it's
Amazon,
there.
Amazon,
Yeah.
Amazon, Target.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of fun stuff. Okay, so they come to you. It's not even that they have this like excess capital that's sitting there. They feel like, well, we probably do have other things to invest, but because it's in our account, money, burns a hole in your pocket, right? And so it's like it will go somewhere. We just want
Mhm.
it to stop going to insert favorite retail place or convenient online website.
Yes.
Um, okay, so you sit them down and you have the goal session, and so you talked about it a little bit before. What are some of the most common, I guess, goals that you hear from couples?
The most common ones, especially for business owners, is we want to go on a holiday. Like, we just want to go on that super awesome 2 week Hawaii or Fiji vacation with the kids and be able to enjoy it. That's usually number one, something fun for them. And then they always feel a little bit guilty about it. And then it's
Right.
followed up with, okay, but we also need to make sure the kids can go to post secondary. And everyone has the same comment that you and I have discussed, like, who knows what that's going to cost in a decade. So, how do we make sure that we can help them do that? And then third is always, well, at some point, I'm not going to want to work as hard as I'm working today. So, what's retirement or semi retirement going to look like? Those are the three most common and biggest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The vacation is interesting because, so when I will just put kind of round numbers on it. I've not had the 2 week family Hawaii blowout vacation, so I'm literally pulling this out of thin air. But I don't know, what does that cost? 10 grand to 15, 20? I don't
Yeah.
know, somewhere thereabouts.
That's, if with the last year of inflation, probably closer to 20 now than it was a couple of years ago pre-COVID. But yes.
Yeah, that's true. So like under that specific example, like how much of this is like permission to, it's almost like you giving them permission to be like, yes, go, versus like, okay, let's set up a like almost a little budgeting or savings plan to like get you there.
Yeah.
Is it really the latter where it's budgeting, or is like half the equation just like kind of saying like, you know, you will still be financially okay if you rip this big check and go to Hawaii with your family and have a lot of fun?
It's both.
Okay.
It's usually both. Most of the time for the vacation part, it's just, I use it as the rips a band-aid off to know that you can do it. It's okay. You're going to come back. The firm will still be fine. There'll still be a check coming in the next month. Like, you've made it. You've done a good job. Part of it's that. It is sometimes about spending 3 or 6 months, tops a year, putting the money in the right savings account to feel confident of
Yeah.
cutting the check for the holiday. Because then it's going, well, do you want to do this every couple of years instead
Yeah.
of it just being a one-time win? Because I think it's really important when you're doing financial planning for yourself or for, your other partners is going, well, it's not just about retirement or saving for the kids' school. It's also about like the day-to-day success of feeling like your money's working hard for you. So putting in a lot of my plans for people is let's do this every year, every 2 years, that big fun holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to jump to number 3 for a little bit, because I think people like to, okay, we're going to go on a holiday. We're going to buy the car or upgrade the house or help take care of mom or dad, pay for college. I mean, there's a lot on the list, but there's, then as you age up, there's like, well, what does either the retirement look like or semi-retirement? Sometimes we'll talk with firm owners and they typically had to put on pause, some of the retirement contributions and, they're trying to catch up. And obviously there's a balancing act of aggressively catching up and enjoying life, and then taking your vacation. So when that comes up, how do you start deconstructing kind of what that number is for you? And, this is obviously not investment advice and we'll keep everything at a high level, but then thinking about like portfolio construction or the right types of assets for the individual.
Right. And that, yeah. So what we start with is because inflation eats away at things, right? As we all know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to say in 20 years, you're going to need X amount of dollars every month to make your world work. So I always work with today's dollars because our software programs will put inflation in there for us. So we don't have to pick, the dollars then. It's starting with this simple equation of if you didn't have a mortgage to pay, because we're going to assume most of you are going to be debt-free by the time you retire. If you didn't have a mortgage to pay, what do you need today to make your life work? Most firm owners, we're looking at anywhere from that $8,000 to $10,000 a month is what they would love to have in retirement. So we start there and start with what do you have today? This is what we want tomorrow. And let's see if we can put 5 to 10% when you're in those busy early years with the kids away for retirement, knowing that as the kids get older and graduate, you're going to be able to catch up.
Yep. Yep.
And dedicate, 10% if possible, just to retirement savings. And then investing it based on risk tolerance, right? Because what I think is okay for risk, it's not going to be the same as the next person. And it's going to change with them as they evolve and grow into their firm. Many firm owners I find are never really at the beginning going to just like one day sell it all and walk away and golf.
Mm-hmm.
Most entrepreneurs and firm owners aren't built like that. They don't just go from 100 to 0. So it's
that's why semi-retirements I think is always interesting for people, which is like, well, if I can do enough to stay mentally active, X, we'll call it 10-ish hours a week, give or take a couple hours, then it's like, okay, I'm involved, I'm being challenged, but I also don't need to live in the daily grind. Somebody else is doing that.
Exactly. And that's most common. And that usually, takes it from 50 to age 65 for a lot of business owners. I've found they're not really ready to totally walk away until later than most of us in our 30s and 40s really want to admit. What I typically see is everyone's like, no, at 50, 55, like I'm done. And then it rolls around and we're like, well, maybe not yet. So we plan for both.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is something, I've known a couple of people that had the ability to turn off at 50, 55 and, they were excited for it. I would say their spouse was completely freaked out. Like, what are you going to do all the time? Like all the time? Like this is what you like to do. You don't have too many hobbies. Like you need to do something. So that makes perfect sense. Look, I know we could talk about this a lot. This is a huge topic and I appreciate your time here today. So 2 things. One, if somebody's listening and you haven't gone through some of these exercises, open up a notebook, start asking these important questions. Even if you're in year 2 or 3 of your journey as a firm owner, start thinking about this now, because if you're putting in the right steps, you're getting your pricing right, you're getting your marketing systems right, you're getting your fulfillment and workflow systems right, tell you, we've seen it so many times in our accounting community. You will get there. These things do compound. And so please take that seriously and, have some fun for 10, 15 minutes and jot down notes from today's interview. And if you want to take it a step further, Colleen, what's the best way for them to reach out, connect, maybe ask you questions, and learn a little bit more about what you're up to?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name and I'll pop right up. I'm also going to have a landing page created just for your audience with just a quick PDF on some of the things that we talked about today. So it'll be at juddwealth.ca/growyourfirm. So if anybody would like to take a look at that, they're more than welcome to.
All right, brilliant. Well, if you enjoyed today's interview, please leave a 5-star review. It helps us get the word out. And if you really enjoyed today's interview, share it with a fellow firm owner that needed to hear something on today's episode. Colleen, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks so much.